from the Union of Concerned Scientists to brief us on updated information from their Ripe for Retirement and Burning Coal, Burning Cash reports. Both of these reports were originally issued several years ago, and it's excellent to have updated information. UCS has been an important partner for us over the years. They provide critical analyses and valuable tools for the country and our Southeast region to support efforts to increase renewable energy, retire coal plants, and protect our water resources. We're thankful for their work and for joining us today. First, let me introduce to you Dr. Rachel Cletus. Rachel will be covering the Ripe for Retirement report, which showcases UCS's economic analysis of continued operation of coal units compared to the cost of operating alternative forms of energy generation. She will explain how many power plants in our region are still ripe for retirement and why. Rachel is an economist with the Climate and Energy program at UCS. She works primarily on designing and advocating for effective global warming policies at multiple levels of government. She analyzes the economic costs of inaction on climate change. In addition to her work with UCS, Rachel has worked with the World Wildlife Fund and the TELUS Institute. She holds a PhD and a master's in economics from Duke University and a bachelor's in economics from West Virginia University. After Rachel, we'll hear next in our presentation today from Jeff Diet about the Burning Coal, Burning Cash report, which was just re-released 2 weeks ago. The report ranks states according to how much money was sent out of state to pay for imported coal in 2012. Jeff will go into detail about how all of our southeastern states send significant amounts of money out of state for coal. This is money that could be spent on in-state clean energy projects and boost our local economies. Jeff is the Assistant Director of Energy Research and a Senior Energy Analyst in the Climate and Energy program at UCS. Jeff is a co-author of several UCS reports and conducts analysis on the economic and environmental costs and benefits of renewable energy and energy efficiency policies. Prior to working with UCS, Jeff was an environmental protection specialist for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Jeff holds a master's degree from Boston University in Energy Resource and Environmental Management and International Relations. So without further ado, I will turn this presentation over to Rachel to get us started.
Thank you very much, Ula, and thank you everyone for joining us today for this webinar. We're very excited to present some updated results from our Ripe for Retirement and Burning Coal, Burning Cash analyses. As many of you are aware, the U.S. power sector is going through a period of unprecedented change, and what we're seeing is a decline in our historic reliance on coal-fired power and a shift towards cleaner generation sources like natural gas and renewable energy. 59 gigawatts of coal have already been retired or announced for closure since 2009, and we're seeing a record ramp up in cleaner sources. And it's a historic opportunity for us to make choices going forward that are better for the environment, better for our health, and just more sustainable overall. But we do have to make some critical policy choices right now. The first analysis we're presenting today is an update of our Ripe for Retirement work. This is a work that has also been published in the Electricity Journal last December, and we have a number of resources on our website that we'll point to at the end of the presentation where you can access the information from the analysis. We use data from SNL, EIA, and the EPA in doing this analysis. We have generator level data for generators around the country. And as most of you know, a coal plant could have more than one generator. So we're at the generator level of specificity here. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble changing advancing the slides. Let me just figure this out and great. So this next slide here shows, with some data, what I just mentioned in narrative about our shift away from coal towards cleaner sources. This is data from 2008 through 2012, and you can see that the share of coal in our electricity sector generation has fallen from over 50% to just over 37% during that time frame. And we've seen a pretty sharp ramp up of natural gas going from 17 to 30%, but also a noticeable ramp up in renewable energy resources, primarily wind and solar in recent years. So this map here shows the little over 28 gigawatts of announced coal retirements that we've seen since 2009, and they're concentrated in the Midwest and the Southeast, where much of our old coal fleet is located. It's important to recognize that many of these generators, they tend to be older, more inefficient, and therefore more vulnerable in an economic sense to the market factors that are influencing changes in our electricity sector. In our original right for retirement analysis in 2012, we identified about 59 gigawatts of generators as right for retirement. And as of December 2013, 73 of those units, accounting for 10 gigawatts, either retired or were announced for retirement. And in our new analysis, we're showing 69 additional coal units, or 11 gigawatts, now deemed right for retirement. And I'll walk you through those results in the next slide. So in brief, here's our methodology. What we did, and this methodology is similar to the one we employed in our 2012 analysis, although we have made some updates in our cost and performance assumptions for wind and natural gas, and we've done some regional specific wind capacity factor analysis, and I'll show you those results later. But our core methodology remains the same, which is that we basically looked at the base running costs of each of the generators, the coal generators around the country. Then we looked to see whether these generators had 4 critical air pollution controls, SOx, for SOx, NOx, mercury, and PM. For SOx, we were looking for scrubbers, for NOx, SCR with over 90% capture, for particulate matter baghouses with 99% capture, for mercury controls, activated carbon injection with up to 90% removal when combined with baghouses. And we also did a sensitivity with high and low natural gas prices, where we essentially used a plus or minus 25% relative to EIA's reference case assumption from AEO 2012, and that number was $4.65. We also have a side case for wind with and without a PTC extension and a carbon price of $20 a ton. And here are the main findings of our analysis, which is that we found nearly 21 to 59 gigawatts of coal generators at risk compared to other cleaner generation sources. In our core case, the comparison we made was with natural gas combined cycle plants. And the range that you see there is a comparison with new natural gas plants and existing natural gas plants. So obviously, since new natural gas plants have a higher cost, they're less ripe for retirement. There are more units deemed ripe for retirement when you compare it with that higher cost than there are with existing natural gas combined cycle plants. We also, as I mentioned, did a side case with a comparison with wind with and without the PTC. And as I said up front, this is an opportunity for us, and that means every actor in the electricity market decision-making process, regulators, investors, utilities, and policymakers in general, to be thinking about how we go from where we are now to an electricity sector that's much more clean and sustainable. I'd also like to point out some important caveats to our results here. So this is a straight up economic test. It's kind of a stress test. It's a snapshot analysis of coal-fired generators around the country. This is not meant to be an analysis of EPA regulations, Clean Air Act regulations. It doesn't include a host of other pollution concerns that might exist related to water, coal ash, etc. And we were not able, through the spreadsheet analysis, to do any kind of reliability test. So we've identified generators that we think should be considered for retirement. We recognize that there might be individual considerations around particular units that are important for reliability that will have to be examined. So while we're saying that these should be considered, we're not saying absolutely that every one of these should be shut down immediately. To talk you through a little bit of our analysis in more detail, on this graph, what you're seeing, those green little diamonds, each one of them is a coal generator that was in our data set. And the two blue lines there basically bound the operating costs in terms of dollars per megawatt hour for existing natural gas combined cycle plants. That's the dark blue line there. And new natural gas combined cycle plants, that's the light blue line there. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously the new plants have a higher cost attached to them. And if a generator, in other words, if one of those green diamonds lies above that line, it shows that they're more expensive to operate than that natural gas plant and would be deemed ripe for retirement in our analysis. So in this graph, what you see basically is compared to existing natural gas combined cycle plants, we have 329 generators or nearly 59 gigawatts that are above that dark blue line. And we have 191 generators or nearly 21 gigawatts that are above the light blue line for new natural gas combined cycle plants. And just like the plants that have already been announced for retirement around the country, what we also found that our ripe for retirement generators, they tend to be old. Their average age is 43. They tend to be run at fairly low capacity factors relative to the fleet as a whole. And they are polluting generators because most of them lack at least, we found over 70% of them lacked at least 3 of the 4 major pollutant controls we analyzed. The little pie chart there shows you also that even if one doesn't include the cost of adding in these pollution controls, there are some units that we identified as so-called overripe units. These are units which are already failing our economic test, regardless of whether you add in the cost of the pollution controls or not, and that's about 23% or 13 gigawatts. So where are these ripe for retirement units? As you might expect, this 59 gigawatts, much of it is concentrated in the Midwest and the Southeast. This is where historically our nation's coal fleet has been concentrated. A lot of the older plants, the underutilized plants are concentrated here. The map is also showing basically the whole generation fleet. You see the greens are the already announced for retirement, the light blues are the operational fleet, and the dark blues are what we deem ripe for retirement in our analysis. And just for context, that 59 gigawatts is about 18% of the total coal fleet, and they produce about 6.3% of the total electricity used nationwide in 2009. So we also did a state-by-state analysis of where these plants are concentrated, and you can see that the top 5 states include Michigan, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and Indiana. There are 19 states with more than 1,000 megawatts of ripe for retirement coal-fired generation, and they're all in the eastern half of the country. Georgia leads all the states with more than 7,400 megawatts of ripe for retirement capacity. And Michigan leads in the number of generators, but these tend to be the smaller generators. They're 39, mostly smaller units. This map, the next map, basically now shows not just the ripe for retirement, but also the announced retirements that have been made around the country. And you can see this is a pretty significant chunk of our coal fleet, 87 gigawatts. And now by this metric, when we rank the states, they rank as Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Florida, and Indiana. So much of the same states in the mix, but the ranking changes a bit when you take into account retirements that have already happened. Power companies in states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and North Carolina have already made a number of decisions that it's better to retire than retrofit their oldest and dirtiest coal generators. We also closed our analysis in October, and in November, TVA made a pretty significant retirement announcement, which is not taken into account in our analysis. And then in one of our side cases, when we do a comparison with wind power, including the PTC extension, we find up to 71 gigawatts of ripe for retirement generators. And what this side case was meant to show is the increasing competitiveness of wind power compared to coal. So it's not just natural gas that should be stepping up, but also these other cleaner resources like wind power. And in the straight-up economic test, it's clear that wind has an important role to play, and there are a number of states in which wind can play the significant role as we make this transition. A little bit more on our wind power case. In this graph, basically, we're looking at the CERC region, which is the southeast region, and looking at how the coal generators in that region compare against wind resources with and without the PTC. So again, similar to the earlier scatter plot, we saw the green diamonds there are the coal generators, including the cost of needed pollution controls. And those costs are being compared to the operating costs of the light blue line, the wind without PTC, and the dark blue line, the wind with PTC. And you can see, of course, that there are a number of units that fail this test in terms of their cost comparison with wind. We also, as we did in our previous analysis, you will find online that we have named every single generator that we deem ripe for retirement, and we also have information available for generators by company in terms of the ripe for retirement units. And this is important to recognize because these utilities are in a position to make some major decisions about what they replace their retiring coal fleet with. And we've seen that in some cases they are making decisions to bring in more wind power or convert to natural gas. And in other cases, we have companies that are being more recalcitrant. So this list should not be a surprise to anyone. I should mention here that the Tennessee Valley Authority number there does not include the November announcement, and that's why we dropped in that footnote that shows that they did make a major announcement in November. That would, of course, boost their announced retirement number. It shouldn't change their overall ranking in this analysis very much. And therefore, you know, there's a real opportunity here for these companies to make different choices. This graphic it's got a lot of information buried in it, but I wanted to talk through real quickly what this is. This is basically our entire analysis with all the side cases that we did. So what you see on the far left on the green is basically all the coal generators we analyzed. That was the total coal fleet as of 2011 from the SNL database, 347 of them. And then each of the side cases, our core case was a comparison with existing natural gas, and that's where we get the 59 gigawatts of ripe for retirement. Then we made a comparison with new natural gas, the 21 gigawatts. And then we added a carbon price of $20 a ton and did the same comparison with existing and new natural gas. And here you see that with a carbon price, you get a much greater amount of coal retirements, the range being from 131 to 55 gigawatts. Then we also did a comparison with wind, with and without the tax credit. And again, depending on whether wind has the tax credit or not, we get a range of 22 to 71 gigawatts of retirement. Buried in those stacked bars there are also the already announced retirements and the retirements that happened between 2011 and 2013. So as I mentioned, we have an opportunity here to decide what to replace these retiring coal plants with. Obviously, the first and best thing to do is invest in a lot of energy efficiency, so we actually don't need all that extra capacity. But to the extent that we need to replace that coal capacity, if we replace it with renewables, we can of course get much greater CO2 reductions and therefore benefit our climate goals as well. So this graphic basically shows you, depending on whether you replace that coal with natural gas or with renewable zero-emission sources, how much can we save in terms of CO2? And we have an opportunity to save up to 365 tons of CO2 emissions if we make the right choices. So we're replacing a lot of coal, and we do get questions about, so what does this mean for reliability overall? So I should say up front that we did not do a reliability analysis in a dynamic sense. But what we did do is look at what existing resources are available in the electricity sector right now to step up. And the most important resource that we have, of course, are renewables and natural gas. A number of our natural gas plants are being run at less than their available capacity. And those plants can be ramped up to provide additional electricity. And we have the option to expand our renewables. So what this graphic is showing is basically around the country how, in the different regions, how much capacity is available from existing natural gas plants. And you can see for the total U.S., the natural gas fleet is being run at about 40% capacity factor. It could be run much higher. Technically speaking, they can go up to 85% or over. But our analysis showed that nationwide, if we just ramped up to about 60%, we'd be able to make up this lost coal capacity. Now, that's a national figure, and if you go down the right of this bar chart, you'll see at the regional level how those numbers play out. So, for example, in the CERC region, we would have to ramp up to a little above 60%. We could also take account of the fact that we have renewables and efficiency coming online, and if we take into account those renewables and efficiency, we would need to ramp up slightly less in the CERC region. So, again, there's a lot of information buried there, but that's essentially what the graph is trying to show. And we can see that in every region of the country, we have enough resources available to make up the difference as coal is being retired. This is another graph that shows a similar information where, again, we're looking at the total ripe for retirement as well as the announced retirements. And we're comparing this with the resources that are available in each of the regions. And this is renewables and efficiency that are coming online from policies that are already in place through 2020. So no additional new policies, just the stuff that's coming online in states through 2020. And you can see again that in every region of the country, we have more than enough resources coming online from cleaner sources like renewables, efficiency, and natural gas to make up the difference. Finally, I just want to point out that we should pay attention as we're making this transition not to get over-reliant on natural gas. There's definitely an opportunity here with cheap natural gas prices. They've been a boon for the economy. They're providing an opportunity to lower our emissions tremendously. But we know that from a climate perspective, natural gas, in the end, it's still a fossil fuel. There's also the issue of fugitive methane emissions and other environmental and public health concerns around the use of gas. So in a sense, we have to be really careful here as we make this transition that we don't crowd out renewables and efficiency in our rush to gas. And I think our analysis shows that there's ample opportunity for renewables and efficiency to step up, and it's a question of having the right policies to get that in place. And Jeff now will talk a little bit about the burning coal, burning cash analysis and walk you through some of those recommendations that we think apply across the board to both analyses.
Thank you, Rachel. Let me just make sure that slide advances work and get us to the next part of the presentation. And I also just wanted to say thank you to SACE and ULA especially for hosting this webinar on our behalf. And you know, it's been a real terrific partnership between UCS and SACE over the years. And as the leader of and clean energy policy in the Southeast, it's great to be able to work with SACE and all of you on the phone for the work that we're doing to try to transition to a clean energy economy. So let me just dive in here to the second analysis. As Ula mentioned, our burning coal, burning cash update this year is an update of a 2010 report that we produced, which was based on data from 2008. And what we wanted to do at the time, this is sort of the first time anybody had really taken a look at it in this way, but kind of looking at what the difference between a coal consuming state and a coal producing state, and recognizing that their economic interests are very different in a lot of ways. And there are a lot more coal consuming states out there than there are coal producing states. And so we wanted to take a look at the numbers behind that and see who were the biggest depending states in terms of coal imports. So this latest analysis is an update on that, and it's using 2012 data, which was the most recent available that we had. This is all publicly available data, and what we tried to do is, like we did the last time around, is to rank the states based on net imports, which is essentially coal imported into a state less any coal that's exported out of that state from local mines. In the Southeast, you know, most of the states in the Southeast have no coal, in-state coal resources, so it's pretty much 100% of their coal use is imports. There are a couple exceptions to that, but largely the Southeast, like the Midwest and the Northeast, are wholly coal importing states and regions. We ranked by a few different categories, which I'll get into and show some of those results in just a couple of minutes here. So what I wanted to do first, though, is just give you a sense of what the main findings were of our analysis. So this time around, we found 37 states were net importers of coal in 2012, and they paid out about $19.4 billion in order to import about 433 million tons of coal from other states and, in some cases, other countries. 8 states in 2012 spent more than $1 billion on net coal imports. And because this is an update, we did take the opportunity to look back and compare the results from our previous analysis. And between 2008 and 2012, we did see that expenditures on net coal imports fell by about 25%, as more utilities are switching over to natural gas and renewable energy, kind of tying into the remarks that Rachel just made about the significant transition that the electric power sector has been going through in the past few years. And you know, this opportunity or this analysis, I think, presents a very good, strong opportunity to discuss the benefits of deploying greater amounts of homegrown renewable energy and energy efficiency. And so that is an important component of our key messages and findings here. So again, just taking a look at some of the national findings, this is a map which shows the 37 states that were net importers of coal in 2012, and it ranks them in order. You'll see in the darker blue here the 8 states that spent more than $1 billion on net coal imports. Texas led all states here, but you can see largely the Southeast and the upper Midwest are some of the higher ranking states in terms of their dependence on coal imports. And you know, this money, why this is important is because a lot of this money is draining out of local economies when it could be better spent on cleaner resources. So where are all of this coal? Where's all this coal coming from? There are a number of coal producing states, but when you look at where the coal is being exported to, 3 states sort of stand out here, and these 3 states, Wyoming, West Virginia, and Kentucky, account for 82% of all the coal exports that are being sent to other states throughout the country. In fact, actually, Wyoming, if you really look at it, is leading states. 2/3 of all exports to other states come from Wyoming, primarily because the Powder River Basin in Wyoming has very low sulfur coal resources, and low sulfur coal has been used for decades now as a less expensive compliance option for many coal power plants to comply with clean air regulations rather than putting scrubbers on. Many states have been able to, or many power plants have for a long time been able to just burn lower sulfur coal, and that's a large reason why so much is coming from Wyoming. That is changing as we're seeing more and more tightening, ratcheting down of clean air regs, and power plants being required to actually upgrade with scrubbers. Just interestingly, though, even though these 3 states are the leading exporters to other states, 2 of the states, West Virginia and Kentucky, are in and of themselves coal importing states too. So in 2012, Kentucky imported $760 million worth of coal. About 1/3 of the coal that was burned in that state came from out of the state, ironically, in order to power those coal plants. So even those states that we consider as the leading coal producing states are dependent on exports or on imports for powering some of their plants. Now, Rachel already already touched on this point, but I think it's relevant to this analysis as well when we talk about the trends here that the U.S. coal generation has been declining in recent years, and this is just another graphic that illustrates that decline in coal and the uptick in natural gas and renewable energy resources. So I just want to put that into context when we talk about the national findings here, because not only is coal generation declining, but coal imports are declining, as I mentioned earlier. So between 2008 and 2012, net coal imports expenditures fell by 25%. When you look at coal imports as a function of weight or tonnage, the decline was about 30%. So they're actually using less coal. The reason why they're spending a little bit more on it is, as I'll get to in just a second, coal prices are rising. Now, with respect to coal imports from other countries, that's an area that has declined quite significantly. In 2008, more than $1.8 billion was spent on coal imports, on international coal imports. 16 states were bringing coal in from other parts of the world, Colombia, Venezuela, and even as far away as Indonesia. In 2012, that number was down to 7 states and a little under half $1 billion, so roughly a 75% decline. And we'll look at that ranking in just a second. But even as coal generation is declining and coal imports are declining, coal prices are continuing to rise over a longer period, but particularly in the past several years. This is very pronounced actually in the Southeast. We're seeing in states like Florida since 2008 a 26% increase in coal prices. North Carolina has experienced a 17% increase in coal prices. North Carolina has some of the highest coal prices in the country. Tennessee even, coal prices were increased from 2008 at 15%. So we're seeing even though states are using less coal, they're paying more for the coal they are importing. Now let's take a look at some of the state-specific rankings and findings and how the Southeast fares when we do that. So here are the 10 most coal-dependent states as a function of the money that they spent on net coal imports. Texas leads all states, but there are actually 6 states from the Southeast in the top 10, including North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, and Tennessee. And the rest of those states are from the Midwest, as I mentioned earlier. But most of those states, all but Tennessee in the Southeast, spent more than $1 billion on exports on imports from other states for coal. And all of those states, but for Alabama, imported all or nearly all of their coal from other places. So Alabama's the only state with some in-state mining of coal that was used in-state. The next ranking is by net imports by weight or tonnage. Here again, Texas leads all states, but there are 3 states in the Southeast, Georgia, North Carolina, and Alabama, all of which imported more than 18 million tons of coal in 2012. And again, these numbers are just a snapshot of 1 year. You have to keep thinking, well, they're doing this each and every year. Billions of dollars are going out each year, so, and tons of coal coming in. The next one is rankings by expenditures on international imports. Now, in 2012, as I said, the trend this is an area where we're seeing a much steeper decline in coal imports from overseas. But in 2012, almost all of the foreign coal imports came from Colombia, and nearly all of that went to Alabama and Florida. And then we've got Virginia and a handful of Northeast states, and then of course Hawaii as an importing state as well from overseas. Another way to look at this is kind of on a per capita basis. How much are these utilities, in the form of ratepayer dollars, spending per person to import this coal from other places? And when you rank our findings in this fashion, we see that South Carolina takes the lead amongst all states, having spent $242 for every man, woman, and child in the state on coal from out of states. Alabama, North Carolina, and Georgia also make this top 10 ranking from the Southeast. And this is an interesting way to look at it. It's sort of an eye-popping number when you think about how much is being spent here. It's even more drastic when you juxtapose that against state investment in clean energy technologies. And so as a function of doing that, we took a look using a great report that the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, puts out every year, which ranks states by their commitments and policy support for energy efficiency. And what this shows is a ranking of the states that were in the top 10 on a per capita expenditures for coal dependency, as well as a handful of other Southeast states there. It shows how much money they spent per capita on on energy efficiency programs in 2012. And as you can see, in most cases, they're spending as much as 10 to 100 times or more on coal imports than they are spending per capita on energy efficiency programs. And every state in the Southeast is spending less than the U.S. Average of about $18 per capita on energy efficiency programs. So this is an area rich and ripe for growth in terms of tapping into the tremendous energy efficiency potential that the region has. Now, as part of this project, we did develop a set of fact sheets and maps that were very popular the last time around when we did this analysis, so we did it again this time. We have maps showing where the coal where the money is going to pay for the coal imports for 23 different states on our website, including every Southeast state, so you can find your map there. Just I want to run through a couple of examples here from the Southeast. So this is North Carolina up here, so you see $1.76 billion leaving the state. It's going to 6 different states. Mostly the money is being sent to mines in West Virginia. In Georgia, we have money going to 6 states to pay for coal, and in this case, mostly going to West Virginia and Wyoming. And in Alabama, Alabama, as you saw earlier, is one of the states that imports heavily from overseas, from Colombia, from Drummond Company-owned mines in Colombia, as well as 6 states in the West and Appalachian region. So again, we do have state maps for all of the states in the Southeast. If anybody's interested, they can find them on our website. Now, the national sort of trend in terms of declining coal use and coal imports is quite evident when you sort of look on a state-by-state basis, and again, that's very clear here in the Southeast. And I think in general, that's good news, right? We're using less coal, we're spending less money on coal, imports from other places. You can see here that in the Southeast, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, all 25 to 35% reductions from 2008 in terms of their spending on coal imports. And that's largely because, as Rachel pointed out, many states are making a kind of large-scale shift from coal to natural gas. And again, that's the Southeast is very emblematic of this trend. So here, just as a couple of examples, we have Georgia, their coal and natural gas as a percent of their total generation mix in 2008 and compared again in 2012. You can see natural gas was just 10% of the mix in 2008 in Georgia, 3.5 times more in 2012, so a huge ramp up in decline in gas and decline in coal. Likewise in Alabama, going from 15% natural gas up to 36% natural gas. And as I said, this is a trend that we've seen in other Southeast states as well. And Rachel sort of touched on, why we at UCS and many others are concerned about the many risks of an over-reliance on natural gas. So I'm not going to go into that again, but I do think that's sort of relevant here because here in the Southeast, many states have no in-state coal resources. Many Southeast states have no in-state gas resources either, and so they're just essentially, from a import dependency standpoint are just flipping dependence from one fossil fuel to another. North Carolina is a great example of that. And, I think what we much rather see, and we are seeing some evidence of this in some places, is that instead of over-relying on natural gas to cut coal and coal imports, we'd much rather see a greater reliance on energy efficiency and renewable energy policies, or renewable energy technologies, as a way of cutting coal imports and investing money in local economies. And so we do talk about one of the key findings is that with strong state clean energy policies like renewable electricity standards or energy efficiency resource standards, we're seeing some states be real leaders in replacing their coal with cleaner technologies. The Southeast is a region that, as you all are very aware, that very much lacks in some of these kinds of policies, but that doesn't mean that there isn't other things and other ways to be advancing renewables and efficiency in those states. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second with the recommendations. So this is sort of we're getting to the recommendation, though. This is kind of a combined set of recommendations for both our right for retirement and our coal imports ranking the states analyses. And, as a way of sort of continuing this transition away from coal towards cleaner, lower carbon sources of energy, we put forth a series of recommendations. It starts with, really trying to make sure that we're making smart decisions about how and when to retire our oldest and dirtiest coal plants. And that comes, that's a decision made by regulators, investors, and utilities, many times through IRP processes and elsewhere. But to really give good thought and demonstrate that those retrofits make more economic sense than investing in energy efficiency and renewable energy. In many cases, we believe that is not the case and that they should be investing in cleaner technologies instead. In addition to RESs and energy efficiency resource standards, there's a number of state and federal clean energy policies that we recommend strengthening. I won't go into those here, but there are many, I think, that are relevant to the Southeast. Happy to talk about them in Q&A if necessary. We are in the process of working, or the EPA is in the process at President Obama's direction of developing strong power plant carbon standards. And we're going to see the draft rule for the existing power plants come out in June. And we really feel like this is another way, it's going to be another way to help hasten this transition to a low carbon economy. And then, of course, with policies, we also need state level policies to advance clean energy and energy efficiency. We need smart resource planning at the regional grid operator and utility level too. So I do want to, before I hand it back over to Ulla to facilitate Q&A, I do want to just point out that there are a number of different ways that we think that you all can use these analyses in your advocacy. Here are just a couple of examples, either through Facebook or Twitter. We have sample posts that we can send around to folks if you're interested in taking advantage of using these results from these analyses in social media efforts. It's really important, I think, to educate decision makers about these issues, and you have the relationships, being advocates in the states, directly in the region, in the Southeast. You have the relationships with the state and local political leaders and thought leaders, and can make that connection using these materials. And so we have, as I said, many visuals that you can take advantage of. So we have tables and charts which rank in a number of different ways. We have slide decks that people can use. We have a series of maps and fact sheets, as I alluded to. So there's lots of different things on our website, which I will show in just a second, that you can download and take advantage of. And Rachel or myself or anybody else on our team would be more than happy to follow up with anybody if you have other good ideas about how to use these analyses in your work. So with that, I will again say thank you to Ulla, and here are our contact information and the web links to the two analyses, the burning coal, burning cash, and our right for retirement analysis, so you can follow those links to get there. So I'll say thank you again and just pass it back over to Ula.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff and Rachel, for those presentations. I just want to say that the Southeast fact sheets are also on cleanenergy.org in our fact sheet section of the website. So if that's easier, if you're familiar with our website and want to find them there. And we also have blogs and other materials related to both of these reports. We do have some questions that have come in. We'll go ahead and take them in the order in which they've been received. If you do have additional questions, please send them in and tell us which report you're associating. I think the first questions are came in during Rachel's presentation, so they are ripe for retirement. The first one is, are the new wind facilities in proximity of the vulnerable coal facilities, or is new transmission required to send wind from the west to utilities in the east?
Thank you very much, Ula, and thank you for the question. Indeed, there are a lot of opportunities to expand wind in every region of the country. And if not wind, there are other renewable resources like solar available, solar, biomass, etc. So it's clear that this opportunity to replace coal exists in every part of the country. And in fact, we've seen in a recent retirement that American Electric Power announced when they retired the Muskingum River Power Unit 5. When they made the retirement announcement, they also said that they would be developing 200 megawatts of wind energy as partially to replace that lost generation. So I think this is there's both an opportunity here because we know these resources exist around the country. We know in some cases new transmission will have to be built to bring the resources to where they're needed. And to do all of that, we're going to need policy commitment from not just state policymakers, but also regional transmission operatives that are making decisions about long-distance transmission. So this is clearly an issue that can be dealt with at the regional level to bring more renewables online. And I'll just switch over to one of the slides that shows basically the fact that there is this wind resource available in every part of the country, and there's just a question of making sure that we bring it online commensurate with the amount of coal that's being retired. Let me just try to find the right slide here. Right, so you can see in this slide, basically in every region of the country, we have enough renewables and efficiency coming online to replace what we're deeming the ripe for retirement coal capacity. So the resource potential is there. It's a question of bringing it online as coal is being retired.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. The next question is also ripe for retirement. What are the assumed unit costs of pollution control for SO2, NOx, mercury, and particulate matter?
Right. So this is actually a question that doesn't have a one answer because those pollution control costs in many cases depend on the size of the plant, even sometimes on the vintage and the heat rate of the plant. But in the appendix to our Ripe for Retirement report, we lay out the sources of the data that we used. So in the case of the scrubbers and SCR, we used data from EPA's IPM model, which comes from Sargent and Lundy. And in terms of the cost of baghouses and activated carbon injection, we used an analysis that was done for the Eastern Interconnection Planning Cooperative. All these data sources are cited in the technical appendix to our report, and you can find them. There isn't sort of $1 figure for every single unit. And that's just because of the way these pollution controls operate. One thing I should mention is that we did take the trouble of adjusting the pollution control costs if there were multiple units going to a single flue in the case of SOx. And this adjustment, we didn't make it in the case of NOx because there the catalyst and the SCR technology has to be installed at the boiler. So in that case, we didn't make the adjustment, but in the case of the SOx control, we did.
Great, thanks. So the next two questions are about natural gas, and I think they can be maybe answered in tandem. The first is, what is the water use issue related to natural gas fueled power plants that you mentioned? And the other is asking you to elaborate a little more on the over-reliance concerns about natural gas and fracking.
Great. So what we, when we talk about water use in particular on that slide, what we're referring to is the high amount of water that's needed for fracking operations, but also the fact that natural gas power plants require water for cooling. UCS has done some research on the cooling water piece in particular as part of its Energy and Water in a Warming World research project, and this is again available on our website. In terms of the risks of over-reliance on natural gas, what we'd like to point to is the overall life cycle risk from an over-reliance on natural gas, and not just at the point of burning at the generator, but also carbon emissions, methane emissions that might arise at other points in the production and transport of natural gas. I think that it's really important to point out that natural gas does have a role to play as we make this transition from coal to more low carbon sources, and it is playing that role right now in a useful way. It's making this transition cost effective, it's complementing renewables, but there's a real danger here as we go forward that we look to natural gas as the solution, and in fact it ends up being a dead end. So natural gas is still a fossil fuel. It's cleaner burning than coal at the generation point, but it still does produce carbon emissions. And if we are going to bring down our emissions by mid-century to 80% or even greater amounts of reduction by mid-century, which is what the science seems to be showing is needed to help confront the climate challenge, then natural gas is certainly not sufficient as an answer. And we do have other resources whose costs are coming down dramatically. They're here and now and available, wind and solar in particular. And we should really be taking this opportunity right now as we make this transition to also ramp up these other cleaner resources as well as efficiency. So we pointed out a number of risks in that slide. There are also risks to the consumer as we're discovering with this cold snap that we've been experiencing in the Northeast in particular. We've seen a competition for natural gas for heat and electricity, and with heat taking a priority in all cases, we found electricity prices spiking here in the Northeast and shortages, et cetera. So these are real concerns going forward because as parts of the Midwest start to move to more and more natural gas, they will also start to experience this competition and the potential for more disruptive economic market conditions for consumers. We are in the process of doing some research to elaborate on this, doing some more modeling to show how these impacts could play out, what the opportunities are for a contained role for natural gas and a ramp up of other renewable and efficiency resources as we transition away from coal.
And Rachel, there's a follow-on question to the natural gas about the prices that you have and the assumptions that the current prices that you're showing at 1,000 kilowatts and $1,000 per kilowatt may be a bit high. Can you speak to where those numbers come from?
Sure. Well, that $1,000 per kilowatt is the overnight capital cost assumption of building a brand new natural gas facility, and that number, that assumption, comes from the Energy Information Administration's annual energy outlook. So that's a Department of Energy assumption that we simply take. Now and to be clear, that only gets factored in when we compare coal generation against building a new natural gas plant. It does not get factored in when we compare against existing natural gas. For existing gas facility, it's just the cost of fuel and variable O&M that are associated with the operating costs of that facility that get compared to coal generators. So, you know, I think that's well, anyways, that's what the source that we used was for it, was AEO 2013.
Great, thanks. The last question that I have right now is, what can an individual citizen do to help or encourage our local and regional energy suppliers to move forward on retirement and replacement of coal-dependent plants? I'm happy to plug in on this one too, but Jeff and Rachel, do you want to say anything before I do?
Well, why don't you go ahead, Ula, and talk about the local side of things. I can sort of follow up with some things that are happening nationally that even folks in the folks in the Southeast can weigh in on as well.
Okay, sure. Well, first I'd say it depends on which state you're in. The dynamics are very different across the Southeast region. In states like North Carolina, where we have some renewable policies on the books, it is very critical right now that we defend those policies and make sure that they are not undermined. There are a lot of moves afoot in North Carolina in particular to roll back some of the policies that have really helped to make North Carolina a leader in solar energy and some efficiency efforts. In other states, it kind of depends. There have been, in the TVA area, we have seen some improvements and significant commitments to retiring coal plants. We have active efforts with Southern Alliance for Clean Energy going on in Tennessee and Georgia and Alabama to continue to encourage our utilities to embrace renewable energy. And, we're working at different levels of involvement with each of those utilities, and where there are opportunities for us to get involved with government efforts, we do that. We work a lot at the Public Service Commission levels with in states like Georgia and Alabama and Florida. Of course, the Tennessee Valley Authority is a bit of a different beast because it's a federal utility. So I would encourage folks to please get in touch with us at Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and get on our mailing list, because we send out updates for people all the time for opportunities to tell decision makers and utilities that we want clean energy and energy efficiency opportunities increased. And so that would be a great way for you to stay involved and to take action.
Yeah, I guess from a national perspective, I would just follow up on that and say there are a lot of opportunities. We not only need state and regional policies, we need national leadership, and we're getting that from President Obama. But the Congress is really sort of laying down on the job essentially on this. And so, a couple of near-term opportunities is I mentioned earlier that the EPA is working on draft power plant carbon standards for existing power plants, and that rule will be coming up. That draft rule will be released sometime in June. So it's not too early to reach out to the EPA and tell them that you want it's important to develop strong, meaningful standards that gives flexibility to the states to use clean energy technologies to comply with those standards. So we really want the states to be able to tap into their renewable energy and energy efficiency potential to find low-cost ways of lowering their carbon emissions and meeting federal standards. In addition to that, we no longer have a national policy for tax policy for renewable energy. So the production tax credit for wind and other technologies, some other technologies, expired at the end of this past year, and we're currently without a tax incentive policy. That is something that Congress needs to act on, and we have an action alert on our website, sort of teed up, will be coming out actually next Tuesday, that you can go to and take action and tell your Congress people about. The Southeast congressional members are important components of getting bipartisan support for federal renewable energy policy. And then lastly, there is an energy efficiency policy. It's known as the Shaheen-Portman bill, which has been languishing in Congress. That too would go a long way in terms of advancing clean energy efficiency technologies investments at the federal level, which would trickle down into the states in a significant way. That needs a bolster of support from Congress people throughout the country as well. So it is a bipartisan bill, but it's being held up by congressional leaders. So there is, I believe, an action alert on our website too. So about that. So if you go to www.ucsusa.org, we have an action center there. You can sign up to get our alerts similar to what SACE has and be in touch on both state and federal policy opportunities to engage.
Super. Thanks so much. I'm going to turn it over to Erin to conclude the webinar, but again, thank you so much, Jeff and Rachel. And any remaining questions, we will send those directly to UCS to be answered offline.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jeff, Rachel, and Ula, and all of you for being on the call this afternoon. We will be posting the recording of today's webinar on our website, cleanenergy.org, and you will also receive a follow-up to this webinar that will have a link to that recording. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.